Take it away, Thomas.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ramita, for putting this on and all the sponsors. You might not know me. I am on a podcast on YouTube called Cannabis Legalization News. And I'm thrilled to be working with Mita to help moderate this panel on what you can expect to expand your brand in 2025 and all the nuances therein. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie and Matt. Jamie, could you please introduce yourself a little bit and talk about what you think the brands are going to experience in 2025?
Sure. Jamie Pearson. Right now, I am the founder of the new Holland Group. I'm an international consultant. I help brands who want to expand mostly into Europe or from Europe into the US. That's my area of specialty. Mostly the German-speaking countries because I speak German. Before being at the New Holland Group, I was the CEO and president of Bang Corporation. Those of you who know Bang Chocolate, give me a shout out. Best chocolate in the industry. Still the number one chocolate in Canada. And I was responsible for brand expansion across borders. What I think brands can expect in 2025, I think you're going to see more consolidation. That's not news to anybody. I think you're going to see, if we have some safe banking and we have some more political movement, some capital infusion, I'm hoping.
How y'all doing? My name is Matt Cohen, co-founder of Heisman. If you're not familiar with the Heisman brand, Ricky Williams, who won the Heisman Trophy back at University of Texas and then went on to have an illustrious NFL career, but also dealt with a ton of suspensions. This is about 20 years ago. So, obviously things have changed over the past 20 years. We launched the Heisman brand about 3 years ago. And now we've sold into 11 states and we have an extremely aggressive expansion roadmap throughout 2025. And as far as, kind of my prediction on where things are heading, I actually think that these licensing models, where it's just licensing only, until the borders really open up and you're just dealing with state by state, I think you're going to see a lot less of those. It's a challenging model, so that's what I think.
Well, that's fantastic. And let's kind of drill into it, starting on, you spoke about international expansion and then also licensing expansion. And so let's start with the international expansion and how your work, particularly because you had the skill set of being able to speak German, and then you also mentioned quality of the product that was done. So how did you, as the brand manager, build it and get it into the international space?
Through licensing. So we're going to talk about that, whether, one way or the other. I think at the time we had the choice to decide whether we wanted to go get a cannabis license in each state, build out a supply chain in each state, or leverage other people's licenses, their human capital, and their cash. What we figured out was that we were going to be able to plant more flags through licensing. The problem with that model is that there's not a lot of money to peel off the top because margins are so thin. So the reality is the companies that you know and love out there in the world, like Wild, they do reverse licensing, meaning they send their crew in, they have their formulations, they're able to protect their IP better through that model because you're not handing your formulations over to somebody else. You get to keep all of that close to the vest. I did all of my expansion through licensing. And I think if I had to do it all over again, and at the end of my tenure at Bang, we were looking at doing that reverse licensing because rather than taking 6% off the top, you get to keep 94% and pay somebody out the 6%. That's a better, more lucrative model.
And is that sometimes referred to as co-packaging?
No. I'll let him talk about that.
Yeah, so just to echo what Jamie was saying, that was exactly what I was... Sorry, that was exactly what I was referring to, right? So the way that we had initially launched was just strictly licensing, right? And it was incredible for us to be able to get some national exposure quick, right? The challenge is it's not really a sustainable business model. What you deal with is the fact that you don't really control much of the supply chain. You have partners that are marking up your products, versus like you can't really figure out a way to be competitive. Also, like Jamie was mentioning, there's not enough meat on the bone, right? And so, for you to be successful in the cannabis industry, like you need to have a strong marketing program. And if you're not generating enough revenue, like through those royalties, to really support it properly, have boots on the ground, then you're going to run into those issues. And there's new brands that are popping up all the time, right? So we recently recognized that, and we're moving more towards like a reverse royalty model, where, to your point, we're not going and acquiring licenses and building a ton of infrastructure. So we're still leveraging other people's licenses and their infrastructure, but we're coming in with our own SOPs, our own equipment, right? And we're basically running through the manufacturing process, but leaning on their license to handle the rest, and then cutting them royalties. That's where we're.
Can I comment on that?
Yes, by all means, because this reverse model, it's going to be interesting to see if regulators allow it in particular jurisdictions based on the constraints that they put on the operators.
There's always workarounds. Regulators can put whatever roadblock they want, and operators are going to figure out how to get around it. The advantage, what I wanted to add, was that the advantage to either of those licensing models, because a lot of people will say to me, why would I build your brand? I could just build my own. Well, they can't, because they can, of course, but the reason that they would want to build a brand with me or with Matt would be that if you're in 11 states, you're buying 11 states worth of packaging. And if you're doing digital printing, you can buy it in bulk, and they can't buy packaging at that same level that I can buy. So at Bang, we were buying literally chocolate by this semi-truckload. You couldn't build a chocolate brand and compete with me because I could just give you that economy of scale. So that's one advantage to why you would build somebody else's brand, because you will actually make more money selling Bang than selling your own chocolate in that model, or selling Heisman versus selling your own flour. Plus you have a Ricky Williams or a marketing team behind it driving traffic to your stores. The downside, again, of doing that licensing model, whether it's reverse or straightforward, is you don't control your data. And that's really a hard piece, because if you're a brand, you need to know who's buying your stuff in order to start targeting your actual customer. So I would just recommend, if you're a brand out there thinking about doing licensing, whether forward or reverse, you've got to have some contractual guardrails around your data.
Yeah, as far as the data goes, that's where it gets interesting, because it's typically easy to get sell through data and kind of understand that dynamic. But when you're talking about like granular data, right? So from an actual consumer level, for retail, right? It's like, who are the repeat purchasers? What are they getting, right? You have to somehow be tapped into these POS systems. And if you're not working with a vertical operator who has their own retail, it becomes increasingly challenging to gain access to that, right?
Amen.
And figure out how to market towards them properly. But
That's really interesting that they've set up these markets so that you have no transparency of what's being sold to understand how well you're doing.
That is one of the things I speak about internationally, is that like I just gave a talk in Iceland. The government invited me to say, okay, what happens if Iceland goes medical? They have nothing right now except a lot of illicit market. My recommendation to these governments is, look, cannabis you're not going to put the toothpaste back in the tube. It's here. People want it. They know that they've got it in this country, that country, the other country, or across that state. So when you've got these cannabis deserts and you decide that you're going to go ahead and legalize, here's the issue. You can either hold your nose and you can make some crappy legislation that hamstrings the industry, and you peel all the tax money out of it and say, woohoo, we've got all this tax money. Or you recognize, look at this place. We are an industry. And if you design your legislation to allow businesses to succeed, create jobs, and reduce harm, because that's ultimately what cannabis is doing. We're an alternative to alcohol. We are an alternative to tobacco. We are an alternative to opiates. We are an alternative to pharmaceutical chemicals that are addictive, that are killing people. And if the government legislators would embrace the industry and create legislation that allow us to thrive rather than survive and everybody's going bankrupt because there is no meat on the bone, you would actually start to see things differently. So your point is, to me, the point, which is legislators are not designing rules around an industry that allow us to thrive.
And that's before you're double taxed.
Double taxed, triple test. Oh, double taxed, triple tested, all the things that make no sense.
So, Matt, give us a story about you building the Heisman brand that is relevant to what might happen to another company next year.
Yeah, I'll speak about some of like the trends and challenges. When we launched, there was a ton of excitement around the brand, right? And I would say that continued at like a macro level. Even like within the industry, outside of the industry, market specific. You launch, ton of excitement, a ton of hype, but due to some of those constraints, by doing a licensing only model, you would see it start to taper off, right? And that was, that's what made us think about switching up the model. But it's funny because you get a lot of people who may have a popular brand or a celebrity or whatever that think they could come into the cannabis industry and just slap their name on something and make a ton of money. It's just not accurate, right? Like you need to have a very strong ground game here, especially, you could have 10 million followers or whatever it may be globally, right? But it's like, if you're only in 2 or 3 states, what's that really doing, right? And so until the borders open up, then I think you'll see some really interesting licensing deals going down, right? So once the borders open up, you're going to see some really famous, popular people coming in, endorsing brands coming in, and it'll be much easier for them to take a smaller piece and still make a lot of money doing this. Right now, it's not it. You got to figure out how to create a legitimate business, right, out of this, as opposed to just royalty based.
He's so right. And I think one of the bigger issues that we faced at Bang was that we did not control a lot of the elements that, in order to be successful, you have to control. So, for example, if I had a licensing partner that used a company like PedalFast, for example, I'm not beating up on them, but PedalFast is going to go into every dispensary and they're going to have PedalFast on their shirt, which means they're not going in to sell my product. They're going in to take an order. And if you have a product that doesn't sell a lot, there's not a lot of movement in chocolate, there's a lot of movement in 30% flour, right or wrong, that's a fact. I need you to go in and sell my product. I don't have always control over the fact that the licensing partner might be partnered with PedalFast. They're not going to put a Bang shirt on. They're not going to go out and sell. So I have to have a ground game, which means I have to be out selling my product. And if I have that, then that's really a great value add to my licensing partner. The other value add to my licensing partner is if they've invested millions of dollars in cultivation and manufacturing, now what they have is another way of getting that product to market. And that's just meaning that maybe they add a second shift of manufacturing so that building isn't sitting there, with the lights off for 8 hours. They can actually add another shift. So there's lots of synergies if you know how to do these contracts correctly.
Yeah, I want to tap into that too. Something interesting that you said as far as like they come in wearing, their own shirt and they have a portfolio of brands, right? How do you stand out? How do you have them excited about your product? And of course you can incentivize. There's different ways, right? But this happened to us as far as doing licensing deals with partners, because typically our partner has their own house brand. So if they're responsible for the sales side of it, they seem, and this is not all cases, right? But in a lot of cases, they're leveraging, Ricky's celebrity, the power of our brand to open up new accounts for their own in-house brand and then undercut us on price because they were marking us up due to the fact that they had to pay us a royalty. And once again, there's excitement and hype for the initial 6 months, but over time, you have buyers, you have the retail buyers, they're looking for margin as well. So they're sitting here like, well, why am I going to pay 30% more for effectively the same product repackaged, et cetera. So that's where also like product differentiation, being able to compete, price-wise and be competitive there. I mean, that's the game changer. And that's why we adjusted models and kind of course corrected.
Fascinating. And so you both touched on this concept of a ground game being very important for building your brand using this licensing strategy. Do you have any last tips for what you think is particularly relevant for the next year that you'd like to share with the audience?
I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. In this game, and I was speaking about this last night, right? So I come from the tech world where, let's say 10 years ago, you could build a mobile app with no business model, but as long as you're getting traction, right, you can raise millions of dollars and then figure out your business model later. We're not in that position. Right. And so if you think you're going to come into this game and kind of build out an exciting brand, and just keep raising money based on the excitement of the brand, but not really have the margin there just off of top line sales. That's not the case. So, my big advice is, regardless of what brand it is, make sure you're focusing on the business in these early days. Like you need to survive, you need to grow. Focus on that margin.
I would add revenue wins the day. So, when you hear people say, oh, if you build it, they will come. Anybody can build it. But if you don't have shelf, you're going to die. Sales are what matter. So the real commodity in cannabis at the end of the day is that shelf space.
That's fantastic. I was given the 5 minute, now I'm given the 1 minute. Thank you so much for sharing this expertise and licensing and expansion in 2025. Trying real hard to not make it chirp. So can you just one more time remind the audience who you are and where they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Jamie Pearson, New Holland Group. I am jboogie.22 on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn, and that's the only place you can find me.
Yeah, Matt Cohen, co-founder of Heisman, currently the president. You can find me, Matt, at Heisman.com.
Thank you guys so much. And this was another live episode at MJ Biz of Mita Unshackled.
Woohoo!